Hi, parents chat about sex. Yes, you had me right. This week we talk about experience. My name is Grace Bukachi, and I'm joined on set by Pastor Mueni. It's such a joy to have you. You're watching CITAM Church Online. So, Pastor Mueni, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation on behalf of CITAM Church Online. I just want you to know that I'm really, really privileged to have this conversation with you. And let's begin with, who is Pastor Mueni?
I am an authenticity coach, a grief recovery therapist,
Wow.
and a pastor.
Wow.
Yes, I serve under the Nairobi Baptist Church, and I'm a student at the Daystar University.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great. It's really nice to hear that about you. And so we're going to have this conversation from a Christian background, which we as mothers, as pastors, lady pastors, as people in the household of faith, and even those of you who are not born again, thank you for joining us online on this particular program, sharing and discussion. We rarely talk about sex. In fact, after last weekend's post, I have had mothers telling me, can I bring my children? You talk to them. And I'm like, no, I want you as a mother. And that's where this conversation comes in place we need to have this conversation in our homes. So you're a mom?
Yes, I am a mom of a 14-year-old son.
Oh, wow.
And soon to be 8-year-old in 2 weeks.
Oh,
She's going to
cute.
be 8.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, a girl.
Oh.
So a son and a daughter.
Oh, wow. You're blessed. I have 3 daughters, and they're all above 20. And so this conversation is one that we've had. And so maybe I'll say from my part, when my eldest was 6, she asked me, Mommy, where do babies come from? And some of you may remember that in one of the posts I have discussed this. I said, well, a daddy has a susu, which is called a penis, and a mommy has a susu, which is called a vagina. And when they come together in bed, then they get a baby. And it's not a bad thing when it happens in marriage. Needless to say, I shocked my 6-year-old. But precious little sweet soul, she remembers. And because of that, we were able to have that conversation. So have you had that conversation with your boy and your daughter?
Well, my son, we've had a conversation. He's had a conversation with his father.
Wow.
And last year he went through the ropes program
Wow.
at Nairobi Baptist, and then he went through an initiation program organized by the Nairobi Chapel. So he's been through the program, and that was very. It's been interesting for me as a mom to watch him adopt into this new space.
Wow.
And also just redefining my relationship with him. It was very interesting because Pastor Nick of Nairobi Chapel actually had that conversation with us as moms. It was like, okay, moms, when the young men come home,
Yes.
this is how you need to relate with them.
Wow.
And it was a very eye-opening conversation.
Yes.
And you see, it's very easy for me to have thought, I'm a therapist. I got this.
Yes.
I felt so lost. But I am glad someone held my hand and walked us through it. Because Pastor Nick was like, the fathers have been through this, but you moms have no idea how to go through this.
Yes.
Even though you could have been in homes where your brothers went through this,
Yes.
you probably don't remember.
Yes.
Or it wasn't a conversation that was had.
Wow.
So he really, really helped us
Wow.
and gave us good pointers. So I am glad that churches are having these conversations.
Amen.
I think the church needs to lead this conversation with truth.
Yes.
With truth, because only when we speak the truth that sets us free do we identify the lies that blind and bind.
Wow. Can you repeat that again? That was awesome.
When we speak the truth that sets us free, do we then dismiss the lies that tie and that blind and bind?
Wow.
That's how we break them.
Blind
and bind.
So how did you get to hear about sex when you were a young girl?
about sex from my mom kwa umbali, which included don't play with boys. And
they told that to all of us.
Yes, don't play with boys, you get pregnant. You know, and so yeah, there was that. But then, interesting enough, as I was thinking, as we were preparing for this, Pastor Grace, I remember thinking about we went to Shags. Okay. Growing up here, we went to Shags a lot. And I remember one Christmas.
Wow.
One Christmas in my church in Shags.
What?
ABC, Siombuko.
African Brotherhood Church.
Yes.
Go for it, sister.
You know, and this lady, she's called Musenya. She's called Musenya. She's just one of the church mamas. You know, those mamas that just want to see the women, the girls nurtured in church. Yes. And so she called and she said, I think I was in class 6 or 7. And she said, all girls remain. And we're like, okay, so what have we done? So we stayed. And she had this talk with us and said, don't do this, don't do this. And she really had this whole afternoon just talking to us. Wow. But that was because the church had noticed that during Christmas holidays, when schools reopen in January, a lot of the girls would go back to school pregnant. And so the church had intentionally decided we're going to keep talking to our girls. And I actually remember that. Wow. You know, and then the second conversation about sex, again, it is, I am talking to you about sex, but I'm not going to talk about sex, you know. Yes. And I remember August holidays. I was a candidate. I was in 4th form. Wow. So I'm home, and my dad emceed a lot of functions. So somewhere in one of those functions, he had won a raffle, something. So he had a dinner for 2 at the Serena. Ooh, what? So he calls my mom and tells my mom, get ready, I'm coming for you too. So me and my mama, when they did our hair, got ready, going for dinner with Faze. Yes. So went for dinner, the full shebang,
Wow.
You know? And we finished dinner, and we're having coffee thereafter. And my dad said, I brought you here so that you know, if a boy ever brings you here, he has not taken you to heaven. And therefore, you should not give him everything you have. And I remember that about my dad. And the reason why I remember it is because this was in the 90s. So dinner at Serena was not cheap. And my dad was not a rich man. So this was costly for him. Yes. Because even though he had dinner for 2, he still had to pay for the 1. Yes. But also that he chose to have that conversation with me in a setting that made me feel special. Wow. So yeah, I remember that.
That is so precious.
And then shockingly and luckily we'd had that conversation with my dad, because this was in August. I went back to school. I sat for my Form 4 exams. And then in December that year, for the first time, someone I knew was dying of HIV. So those are the three real conversations I remember around sex growing up. Wow. Of course, in high school, you're talking about it. Guys are having sex. Guys are not having it. Guys are pregnant. Guys, you know. But real conversation driven by the church. Unfortunately, in my space, not quite.
Ooh. And the reason we're having this conversation is because it was just announced this week that the schools are opening in January. And there's all this conversation happening on the online platforms with parents, mothers telling their children not to do tabia mbaya. We need to clarify what tabia mbaya is. We need to call it that this is what you mean as a mom. And thanks to all of you moms who've said, please, Pastor Grace, can I have a talk with you can you talk to my daughters? I really honor that. However, I want to pass the back on to you. And for me, like you, I think the first time I actually saw sex was my very, very early years. My parents used to live in Juja Road staff houses before Huruma was built, because Dad used to work for Gavas, so he was a civil servant. And so behind, there were 12 maisonettes, and somehow there were some which were in corners. So in the evenings, we would know in some corners there would be bad manners happening. So I remember being very shocked, and one day, I think blurting it out, and my dad looking at me like, oh, what's going on? And soon after that, then we moved. And
was it because of that?
I don't think so. My parents had been building. But I remember at age 13, before I got my periods, my dad, and I was very excited because I think when we used to go to Sunday school, there was some boys who were very interested. Then he just told me, Mommy, told me straight in my face, those boys just want you for sex. And he told me what it was. I was like, oh, like shock. How can my dad tell me this? I have a very precious relationship with my father. I have learned to grow my relationship with my mom after school because she was very Kali. So you can't discuss things like that with her, which is what's happening with our moms, with us.
Because we are parenting
Yes.
the same way we were parented. So we are the mothers our mothers were.
Imagine.
So we did not like the way our mother, in fact, a friend of mine says our mothers never had conversations with us. They talked at us.
Yes.
You know? And so
Yes.
now many of us
Yes.
are unable to talk to our daughters. We are back to talking at them.
Oh, and that's where we're failing. And that's where we're going to end this video, and we have some more for you next week. But we want to be able to say, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunties, uncles, but specifically you, mommy and daddy, sit down with your child. And I think I would want for you to wrap this up. How do we even ask our children whether they've had sex experiences? Because even in the churches, it's happening, but we want to cover up.
Well, because Pastor Grace, all of us want our children to think we are virgins.
I know. They don't think we know this thing. They think
We just dropped from heaven and we're in our 40s.
Yeah, and 50s here.
You know? And so, well, that's where our children see us. But also as parents, we then realize that we are not equipped to have this conversation with our children because we probably didn't like the way our parents had it, or sometimes our parents actually didn't have it.
Yes.
There was no.
Could it be that's what the grandparents used to talk about?
That's what grandparents did. That's what aunties did. That's what And there's something that we lost in urbanization. There's the sense of community.
Yeah.
But we need to start having this conversation with our children.
Wow. Well, thank you for watching this particular episode, and write us, talk to us, DM us, and I think Pastor Mueni will be glad to have conversations with you. And we're carrying this on next week. So talk to us on any of the platforms that are scrolling at the bottom there. God richly bless you.